Welcome to the Six Steel City Rings podcast. I am Ray Whiting. With me, I have Miss Leanne Lohman, I have Mr. Bob Quinn, and Zach Franciscus. How are you all today?
Wonderful.
Outstanding.
Good. We have a lot to talk about today. But before I get into the news and notes and the rest of our menu, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Zach Franciscus a happy birthday. So say it with me. Happy birthday to you.
Nobody wants me to
Thank you, guys.
We'd lose the two fans I have if I sang.
Hey, Zach. Hey, man, happy birthday. God bless you. And may you live to see many more birthdays, my friend.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Yes.
Oh,
you all
thank
love
you.
it.
Well, I turned 40 and I couldn't think of a better way than to hang out with podcasts.
All right. Hey guys, again, we'll talk about some news and notes, the latest from coming out of Steeler camp, out of Latrobe. Leanne, what you got for us?
Well, the Steelers officially started their joint practice with the Buffalo Bills today at Acrisure Stadium. That practice was closed to the public, so there was no fans there. I know that one of the big topics has been all along, the fighting that seems to happen at these joint practices. I saw that Sean McDermott, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, said that all the players know what's expected of them and that they would be removed for the rest of practice if they displayed any kind of fighting or aggression during the practices. The Steelers, it's practice, so how much did you really win? Supposedly the Steelers won this practice 5-2 in 7 shots. That's what Brooke Pryor said. I know there's some debate about what constitutes as winning and something where you're not really keeping score. Wilson went 3 for 4, and I heard that the first play that went off was a big 40-yard run by Najee, but then they kind of struggled to get the run game going after that until Justin Fields came in and went 3 for 3, and on a fake run on the first play managed to get it into the end zone. Totally caught the defense sleeping on that one. Nate Herbig was out today with an injury, still struggling with that arm injury. So that gave Zach Frazier a chance to come in and kind of have a shot and get another look. I saw that Mike Tomlin had said that he was still undecided on who would play in the game this weekend. And then in the Andy Weidl press conference today, kind of interesting that he was talking. He did a lot of deflection. He talked about that he sees a lot of football maturity from all of these rookies. He feels really confident about the new group that we have. And he was, of course, asked about Brandon Ayuk, which he immediately punted to his old friend Omar Khan, said that was really an Omar question, and he wasn't going to answer that. But we wouldn't be a day with the show if we weren't talking about Brandon Ayuk and the ongoing saga. So what do you think, Ray?
Brandon Ayuk, oh my gosh. This is kind of like a soap opera. Remember Luke and Laura from General Hospital? I mean, it's like, when is it going to happen? When are we going to get married? But in this case here,
like who shot JR? But
exactly,
who's going to sign Brandon Ayuk?
This is my gripe right here. So of course, this kind of grinds my gears. I feel like this. Look, put a deadline on this. I mean, this say, okay, either we're going to do it or not. And I'm tired of it. I mean, the Steelers put the offer on the table and everything. And, it's a matter of who is really pulling the final, who's pulling the trigger finally. So, of course, two sides have to agree. But again, either you're going to do this or not. But, I mean, we need to move forward because, again, we're at the beginning, right before the second preseason game. And very soon the season will start. If it's going to happen, Brandon Ayuk needs to come in. He needs to learn the playbook and everything. And so, that's my gripe right now. Guys, jump in.
At this point, I think it just depends. I'm with Ray, but I know there's a lot of differences between people on this because I thought that Brandon Ayuk had more power in this. And during some prep, we talked and I found out how wrong I was about that because I legitimately thought that Brandon Ayuk could say what he wanted to do with this, and it was just him being Ayuk for some reason about this. But Bob and Lan, apparently San Francisco has more power in this than I thought.
Well, I think he does have a lot of power in this situation. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it takes away from the power he has, but the way I kind of see it is that we can't really go back to San Francisco and say, poop or get off the pot because we've already kind of given them what it is we're willing to trade. So it sounds like from the reports we've heard, Brandon Ayuk accepted what the Steelers are willing to pay him. He said he wants to come to Pittsburgh. And the holdup in this, the glitch is that the 49ers were not happy with what the Steelers offered in trade compensation. And so that's kind of where they're sitting right now. I think what's interesting, and some of what we talked about in prep, is that while Ayuk is somewhat in a position where the 49ers can make some decision about his future, he can also do some things like, magically have a tight hamstring all season or something else, where he makes things difficult for them. I thought it was really interesting to hear Mark Kaboli say yesterday that he believes that Ayuk will be a Steeler, whether it happens before the season starts or October 30th or whatever that trade deadline is. He thinks it will happen at some point because he believes that he'll continue to be somewhat difficult to get the 49ers to finally say, like, that's enough. We'll just take whatever the Steelers are offering and move on from this. This is no longer a good, viable relationship.
Yeah, it's really hard to give somebody a deadline in the NFL. And I think teams that do that make a huge mistake. One of the things we've heard about Omar Khan is that he is very adept at leaving the door open and never closing to the point where there's harsh feelings with any kind of negotiation, which has served him well in contract negotiations. It's served him well in trade negotiations. It's probably why he has ended up fleecing a couple of teams when he has made a trade. Now, that being said, Ayuk has a lot of power because he is to the point where he can say, if you're going to trade me, you're only going to trade me to where I want to go because I'll only sign a contract when I go somewhere else. For those who don't understand how important that is, take a look at the New York Jets and Hassan Reddick. He's demanding a trade. He got traded with only 1 year remaining on his contract, and now he has all the leverage. The Jets gave up compensation for him, and good luck getting anything close to that back if they're forced to trade. So Ayuk can definitely pull and he has. I'm not going to the Browns. I'm not going to the Patriots. I'm not going to XYZ teams. I'm going to the Steelers, or you can re-sign me. But I've seen a lot of people talk about how masterful Ayuk has been in this negotiation. And you got to give him his props. He wants to get paid, and he wants to play for a contending team. Pittsburgh hasn't won a playoff game in 7 years, but they're definitely they're NFL royalty still. Going to a team like the Steelers makes a lot of sense for Ayuk.
It does.
Staying with the 49ers, who've been in 2 of the last 3 or 4 Super Bowls, makes a lot of sense and with different quarterbacks. But it comes to a point for San Francisco, you have to wonder, because they waited till the season almost started to sign Joey Bosa last year to a huge contract. They gave Christian McCaffrey a huge contract, which I think will end up being a mistake. And McCaffrey is great. I get it. He's probably the best running back in the NFL right now. But $18 million for a running back who's injury history, plus he's on the wrong side of his age in his career, I don't think that was a very smart move. They paid Deebo Samuel at the last possible second. So could they pay Ayuk at the last possible second? Sure. There's a lot of guys they didn't necessarily do that to, but bottom line is, if you sign Ayuk and you pay him $30 million-ish, which is the rumored what he's going to get, what are you going to do about Brock Purdy next year?
Right, exactly.
The Steelers have talked about this too, that you're not worrying about next year. You got to worry about this year and winning this Super Bowl. Do you know what I mean? And we'll deal with next year when we get to that. That's come up a few times, from Omar Khan or from Mike Tomlin about, what are they going to do about the quarterbacks and signing a quarterback if they sign Ayuk and all this stuff. We'll worry about that when I get to it. And I think that's a little bit where the 49ers must be. I mean, they were this close to winning the Super Bowl last year. And so you have to feel like if you can keep those pieces together, do you know what I mean, and get them to the next level, you just want to win a Super Bowl. We're not worried about the Super Bowl in 2026.
Well, but one thing I will say, though, Purdy is a little bit different situation. Justin Fields, it's a reclamation project. Russell Wilson is a reclamation project. They got lucky with Brock Purdy in the 7th round, and they're paying him nothing. So he's going to want – and bear in mind, they got to pay him next summer. he's going to want they paid Tua $40+ million. Right. They're not going to be able to afford to keep Purdy, and they feel like they have their franchise quarterback in Purdy. It's not maybe he's not good enough or this. They're sold on him. They're all 100% sold on him. So when you got your franchise guy, you almost have to wonder okay, if we do pay him, are we going to let go of Deebo Samuel next year? Or are we going to, like Leanne said, wait till close to the trade deadline and get rid of Ayuk's contract? We'll pay him, but we're dumping him in 2 months because we know we can't afford it. So
that's why I think they're trying to get everything together right now for this run at the Super Bowl this year before they have to start making those hard contract decisions. It's the reason why I never thought that they would let Ayuk walk in the first place. I couldn't understand when they were talking about squabbling over $4 million. I'm like, it's like pocket change with the contracts you're talking about. I mean, that's life-changing money for me, but for some of these guys, I mean, the difference between 26 and 30 million, it seems like you'd be able to find a way to come up with $4 million if what you're trying to do is just recreate what you did last year a little bit better.
They've got a lot of top-heavy contracts out there.
Oh, tons. They're going to be in big trouble in the not-too-distant future.
I have a quick question, just a little side note. Does this, if the trade doesn't go through, is this egg on John Lynch, the GM for San Fran? Because
John Lynch,
like you said, because Ayuk he wants out, as we all know.
I think if this does not work out, it is San Francisco is the one who ends up looking foolish, because then they're stuck with no compensation for a guy who's probably not going to want to play for them next year, if he does at all. And the Steelers are just left looking like we stood our ground and they were the ones that were stubborn about it. So I don't think there's any way, unless Omar Khan tomorrow suddenly offers 2 1s and 2 2s with George Pickens. That's the only way. But my view of this is it's making me adjust my perspective a little bit, because for all us in Pittsburgh get upset about the non-losing season, it's Tomlin, Ayuk plays for a perennial Super Bowl contender. We are trying to get close to that area. We're trying to get close to winning a playoff game. He wants to play for a team that hasn't won a playoff game in how long, compared to a team that could legitimately win a Super Bowl next year. That says, and the reason, if you would ask him, one name would come up. It's Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin.
Everything else, I want to play for Mike Tomlin. So that Mike Tomlin is worth more to him than a almost guaranteed Super Bowl. It's like I would want to win a Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin more than I do with that group. To me, that says something about the group in San Francisco. That says that what is going on there that makes Ayuk want out of there, despite the fact a ring is supposed to be the most important thing to any player, and it's not to him.
Yeah, but
that's how I see it.
Then again, Zach, there is a very, very plugged-in NFL insider who has a prediction about the Ayuk trade. I don't know if, Zach, you want to throw up the tweet. CTESPN. And for all of those of you who laugh about CTESPN, is he 100% right? No, but he's right more than he's wrong. So
of course, what they say about stopped clocks. So I don't know how much this is real. He does, but I will say this: he's been on several NFL teams. He's a big personality. He goes on all these podcasts and shows. He talks to all these guys from other teams. So I believe that AB probably does have connections. Do you know what I mean? People who tell him stuff. I totally believe that. I wouldn't be surprised if I found out he was buddies with Ayuk and had conversations with him about this stuff. None of that would surprise me.
And you think
Brandon Ayuk, and you want to stir the pot? Who else do you tweet random stuff to? It's like, I want to mess with this a bit more. San Francisco, I'm going to tweet AB. Because whatever AB puts out, it's not going to be what you text him, but everyone's going to have a lot of fun with it. So he probably texted, "Hey, I guess I could be a Steeler," and AB's like, "Brandon Ayuk wants to be a Steeler."
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these always devolve into trade demands with these contract negotiations. In San Francisco, they all have. But Ayuk, he watched the Deebo Samuels thing up close. He watched the Joey Bosa thing up close. So he probably realizes, hey, I got all the leverage in the world. I'll just say I ain't playing. But at the same time, now he's seen how hard you have to go to get paid in San Francisco. And let's face it, they're Super Bowl contenders. they've blown 2 Super Bowls. And Kyle Shanahan has famously blown 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah,
If you
he
count
has.
the Atlanta Falcons, New England Patriots. So are they a contender? Could you make it? Yes. But do you really want to be the best player on the Buffalo Bills? Or do you want to go somewhere else where, hey, maybe I can be part of a resurgence? He's already played in 2. Or 1, I'm sorry. He wasn't there for the first one.
1.
Moving to the Bills preview game, which is this Saturday.
Yes, it is.
As of right now, again, it's Saturday night. And again, I hope it's on televised on TV and everything. So hopefully we can watch it.
NFL Network. I think all 3 of our games are on NFL Network this year. So I think everyone wants to see the quarterback stuff play out. So I checked. Everyone check for yourselves in your local area. But from when I checked, all of them were on NFL Network. So.
Okay.
And if you have an NFL Plus subscription, you can watch the game as well.
Yeah.
How much does Russell Wilson play on Saturday, guys, in your opinion? Leanne?
I don't even think as much as Fields played in the last game. I think it'll be a few series and he'll be out. I just don't think that
disappointing.
I just don't think that Mike Tomlin is going to want to risk injury to him. I don't think he's going to want to take any chances for a lot of negative press to come back on him. I think that Tomlin is kind of shown that he feels somewhat comfortable with where he sees Wilson and how he sees him performing and doesn't feel like he needs all this preseason work. So I don't think it's going to be a lot.
I thought it was going to be quite a bit. And then I hear Leanne say that, and I heard Joe Starkey today talk about how he doesn't think that they're going to play. I think that would be a huge mistake. We've talked about it before, that a big problem with the preseason, with the Kenny Pickett and all, is that we didn't see enough out of them. You just saw a little bit of success, and they assumed that was going to happen. So if, like today, for an example, if you're hitting a 40-yard run with Najee and then not running it well afterwards, I wouldn't be – that means if you would have stopped at the 40-yard run, then all of the other unsatisfactory things you wouldn't have got to see. So Russell Wilson has to play more than 2 series. I understand it's the preseason. I understand, this is not the time to play. If you're really playing for this season, you're not looking to next season. You got to play Russell Wilson enough that you see him struggle and how he responds to that. I don't expect, Arthur Smith to give away anything. I want the bland. I want the vanilla. But you got it. I understand that we're comfortable with what Russell Wilson is doing. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with him as a starter, but I still want to see him do it against the number 1 starters of the Bills. That's what I want to see. I know it won't be playing full hard, but I'm not going to feel fully comfortable unless I see that. And if they pull him after 1 series or 2, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah, I heard Chris Muller the other day predict it was going to be 2 series regardless of outcome. I don't know if I love the idea of 2 series if it's a matter of, if they go touchdown, field goal, or touchdown punt. I'm kind of with Zach on this. I'd like to see him maybe play 3 or 4 series, maybe the whole first quarter. The only way I'd be okay with just 2 series if they're 2 long series, or maybe you give Russell Wilson 2 series and then you keep the ones on the field. And you let Justin Fields go 2 or 3 series with the ones, and then let Kyle Allen have, most of the second half. Although this is kind of, the preseason is so stunted now. This used to be game 3 would be your dress rehearsal. You play a half, come out the third quarter. So exactly. You kind of have to do that now. So if we see the ones without Russell Wilson and maybe the first quarter's Russell Wilson, second quarter Justin Fields, then they come out for 1 series in the second half with Fields in the ones. I think I'd rather see something like that. I do want to see, the chemistry with the wide receivers. Fields has a lot of chemistry with George Pickens. I don't know how much Russell Wilson has. I don't know how much he'll gain in 2 series. So I kind of want to see that when he gets out on the field. I also want to see how Justin Fields responds to all this controversy about the fumbling.
The problem with fumbles is I understand that Ray, we were in prep and Ray was harping on Justin Fields for his fumbles. But the thing is, if you harp on Justin Fields, who's a young running quarterback, you pretty much have to harp on every running quarterback in the league because we jumped around and we checked the stats. Justin Fields isn't actually the worst fumbling quarterback when it comes to how many times these guys fumble? Lamar Jackson and even Russell Wilson and Josh Allen. All of these guys, if you run in the NFL, you're going to fumble the ball more. It's kind of it's the two-edged sword. So with Justin Fields, number one, you were in Chicago, a place where you weren't well coached, you weren't well managed, you didn't have the best team around you. So I'm guessing your fumbles are going to be a little more than expected anyway. So
yeah, Justin Fields has 38 fumbles in his 3 years in the NFL. Lamar Jackson has been in the NFL for 6 years. He has 53 fumbles, and Josh Allen has fumbled 59 times. So to me, it doesn't sound like Fields is like grossly off the mark for where other running quarterbacks are too. I feel like the negative spotlight is on Fields because of all the stuff that went wrong in Chicago. Some of that was not his fault. Yes. And so I think that it's hard to say that he just has this massive fumbling problem when you're in such a screwy offense to begin with. I know that he fumbled in camp, and that came up, again. And I know that he had the fumbles with at the last preseason game with Herbig, and so that brought it up again. But to me, not an offensive line expert, but those look like handoff issues, transfer issues from Herbig to Fields, like more of a Herbig problem than a Fields problem, because we didn't see the same thing happening once Frazier came in. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see, when Fields plays again, if he comes in this game and plays, and like Bob said, maybe with the ones, which would be nice, or at least with Zach Frazier, which would be nice, to see how that transfer goes again this time.
Because what you saw with Kenny Pickett is you saw bad mechanics, you saw bad muscle memory, you saw bad habits, and all of that led to his injuries, his spinning into sacks, his fumbles, all that. I didn't see that from Justin Fields. I actually saw whenever the protection broke down and Daniel Hunter got around and guys went in his face, he reacted really, really well. So I would be very surprised if what I saw Nick Herbig, we saw again. From what I feel, Justin Fields has corrected a lot of those negative things, and maybe a lot of it was just getting out of Chicago. I legitimately don't know. I've never been an NFL player. I don't know how much that refreshing air of not being the savior of a team has to feel for a guy.
Right.
But especially a guy who knows how talented he is.
I mean, look at Deontay Johnson. He had that drop issue that year. Then he spent all the time out there catching tennis balls and seemed to kind of fix that problem to some degree. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like we've seen other players have fumble issues in the past. It's not like this is new to the league. So I feel like with proper coaching, this is something that, like, this feels like a smaller thing to me than having a quarterback that has just bad mechanics in general. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Kenny Pickett.
Well, we talked about 7 shots earlier, and Fields is just such a weapon if you can harness him, which I do think Arthur Smith can harness him. There are plays like the one where he fakes the handoff and just walks in because number one, he's faster than everybody else. I mean, you can't undersell how fast Justin Fields is. And then, all he's got to do is beat a linebacker to the edge most of the time. Yeah. He can do that. Now, could he beat a safety or a corner? Maybe, maybe not. But bottom line is, he's had 1,000-yard rushing season. He's hard to defend down by the goal line.
Yes.
And he's got a decent touch on the ball. So you can't, if you commit to the run, he's going to beat you with the pass. So at least down by the red zone, and we've talked about this before, a lot of the Steelers writers have observed you got to get him the ball in the red zone. And it may just be Russell Wilson goes 95 yards. And Russell Wilson is no slouch. He threw most of his touchdown passes from inside the 10-yard line last year. So it's a good problem to have. The Steelers went from terrible in the red zone with Kenny Pickett to now you've got 2 of the better red zone quarterbacks in the NFL.
Good.
One of which is going to run the offense.
Yeah, the point you bring up is exactly why people keep saying that they should be using 2 quarterback packages and bringing Fields in for these kinds of gadget plays or in the red zone to run the ball in. I don't know that I think that's a great idea, but I mean, that is exactly why this keeps coming up as a possible solution.
Yeah. I know it's different between.
I can feel the jet sweeps coming.
No, go. That's the difference. I feel like not just with having the. Let's say we do have that fun two quarterback thing. Like I'm wondering. I understand it's the NFL, it's not college, it's not high school. But is there really a difference if you have a guy like Justin Fields, who is, I don't want to say a sure thing, but as close to a sure thing within a 5 yard line as maybe Jerome Bettis was? So I remember you had Willie Parker. Willie Parker would take it 95. You brought in Jerome Bettis for those last five. And
Oh
you
yeah.
brought him in because you had no doubt that he. So I would not mind that. If you have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields who legitimately just want to win, if you can get both of them to take their egos out of it, then 195-yard drive, which is impressive for a quarterback to do, and a 5 yard touchdown from Justin Fields, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a little too unorthodox for the NFL. I don't think it works with starting quarterbacks, but
I forget
wouldn't mind
which
that.
head coach said it, but one of them says if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. You know what I mean? If you have a team with two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. So I mean,
but Zach, when you say take out the egos, keep in mind, I mean, all quarterbacks have that ego. You know, you gotta have that ego. I'm sorry, it's
That's why I don't think
it's a
it'll
monster
work.
that you can't shake off. Unfortunately,
That's why the Najee and Jalen situation I think is so rare, and I think if we break that up just for a couple million, we're going to be upset about that later because you have two guys who really, really are enjoying feeding off each other and don't mind the other getting their carries. That is rare.
it's also not uncommon with running backs. You have different styles of running backs that do different things, like you talked about Willie Parker and Jerome Bettis. Do you know what I mean? The same thing with wide receivers. You have different wide receivers that are used in different ways on the field. Do you know what I mean? It's not diminishing the role of one or the other. Do you know what I mean? But I think when it comes to quarterback, I mean, that's a singular position on a team. There's one number one quarterback, period. You know what I mean? So I do think if Russell Wilson is your starting quarterback and you pull him for everything in the red zone to put Justin Fields in, I think it feels like you're diminishing the confidence you have in that number one quarterback. I mean, whether that's real or just emotion, I think that's how I would assume they would feel if they had part of their job taken away from them all the time.
And they've also got to be careful about if they do, and this was generally when you have these gadget type packages for players, it becomes a little bit predictable for the defense. Yes, Justin Fields is hard to stop. If he's lining up under center, you don't know if he's, or in the shotgun, you don't know if he's going to run or pass.
Yeah.
But if you pass the ball with Russell Wilson and then on third down go, okay, bring out Justin Fields, the defense can pick their poison and say, you know what, we're going to send 11 guys at him, and if he tosses it over our heads to beat us with a touchdown, okay, fine.
Right.
We were talking about receivers. This is perfect. So because we know George Pickens is number one, and he's looked like a number one consistently to me. I don't feel like you can say that enough about him, because to say that a guy should take the next step and then to see, at least so far, that he looks more dominant than he did last season. But one guy I want to bring up before I throw it to you guys is Quez Watkins. Whether he makes the roster or not, I legitimately thought he had signed his warrant out of Pittsburgh whenever he messed up those two punts, because especially this is supposed to be his route in. He has impressed every single day in camp ever since then. Not just at punts, his routes have been better. He's catching balls better. So he understood the mistake he made and that he put himself right on that bubble. So if Quez Watkins ends up being that special teams receiver, that sixth receiver, however many we keep, it's going to be because he bounced back better, and it's going to be because he wasn't defined by his mistakes. So I felt it was necessary to point that out because it impressed me.
I think it's interesting that Quez Watkins is fielding punts instead of Calvin Austin, because I still feel like Austin's long-term value as a returner or just getting the ball in space, not so much a kick returner. I think Cordarrelle Patterson is certainly going to handle that. But I don't understand why you would want to replace Calvin Austin as a punt returner. I don't think he did that badly, especially last season, unless they really legitimately think he's the number two and you don't want to risk injury. But I just don't feel like they're there with him.
No, it is strange that I haven't heard of any possession issues with Austin with fielding punts. I figure if there was a major issue with that, we would have heard about it. So Calvin Austin is like a pure speed returner, so I can't imagine Quez Watkins straight up beating him at that. So you're right. That's very maybe we'll see it in this preseason game. They'll switch it up more, and it'll be Calvin Austin, taking punts with the ones and all that. But if not, you're right. I'll raise my eyebrows a little bit because that'll be kind of a not to the extent of Dan Moore starting, but it'll have my eyebrows raised.
Right, right. I don't know. I feel like in the absence of signing Ayuk or some other bigger name wide receiver, I feel like a lot of this feels like a holding pattern for Roman Wilson to come back. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the big question mark. That's the unknown variable. I know we talked before on the show about how Van Jefferson was trying to kind of emerge and separate himself from the pack as this number 2 receiver and has been performing quite well in camp. But I still feel like we won't really have a complete picture of what this wide receivers room can actually do and who's the number 2 until Roman Wilson finally returns.
Yeah, I believe, in this case here, who will stand out at the wide receiver position? Yeah, Calvin Austin III. That's all to it. I mean, it's all eyes on him, and I believe that if he can show up, because again, he has a lot of making up to do because of that drop pass last week, and so I think this is. I'm not going to say a final audition, but I think he'll make up for last week. He'll stand out.
Yeah, but Ray, he's 5'9". He can't play outside. He just can't. I mean, maybe once in a while on a go to him. Wes Welker didn't play on the outside. He played the slot. In a much different offense. This is a heavy run personnel.
Did he play slot in Miami too?
Yeah.
Or did they? Okay, he plays. I didn't know if they moved him to slot when he went to the Patriots. So okay.
No,
because he made his living there. So
yeah, 5'9" guys are not. I mean, for a player 2, a gadget player 2, or just because of his speed, hey, go deep. Yeah, you can get away with it. But as far as like a number 2, and remember, Arthur Smith. One of the forgotten things about Brandon Ayuk, and I heard today they were talking about it. Ayuk is one of the best blocking wide receivers in the NFL. So he really fits what the Steelers want to do on offense. Roman Wilson was an excellent blocker at Michigan. Van Jefferson is a bigger guy. He's not, he wasn't asked to block a lot in the Rams offense.
Yeah, but he's been out there blocking in camp and showing them that he's willing to do all of that. That's part of what helped kind of, win people over, win some of the media over with Jefferson. What was the fact that he's out there and has said openly, he wants to do all of this, and fit into this offense and be that guy.
Yeah, and bottom line is, go ahead.
Oh, with Roman Wilson being injured, I genuinely assumed that would be Calvin Austin's job. Van Jefferson has pretty much stormed in and said, "Don't forget me," because I like I said, wrote off. I said, "You are our veteran utility guy that we'll have and bring up." Van Jefferson apparently did not like that I said that because he is balled out. I mean, speed and route running and everything that he's supposed to bring, that everyone was like, "Oh yeah, this is what he can do if he wasn't hurt," and what he's doing it. So this is no longer something that if Roman Wilson stays injured, Calvin Austin could just slide in there. Right now, I'd give it to Van Jefferson if I had to pick a number 2 with Roman Wilson injured.
Yeah.
And bottom line is, if you're running 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, which is the staple of the Arthur Smith offense, he runs it more than anybody else in the NFL, or at least he did in Atlanta and Tennessee. You already got Pat Freiermuth, who's kind of a liability as a blocker. You're not going to pair up another diminutive wide receiver who may not also be the best blocker. And he's not the best blocker, but he tries. I'm not saying he's afraid. It's not Deion Sanders where he refuses to tackle.
Right.
But do I really want Pat Freiermuth and Calvin Austin as my outside blockers and running that way? No. And then you become predictable. You're going to run to Darnell Washington and George Pickens' side, whichever way they line up.
Yep.
I think our offensive line is way better than it was last year. But I don't want it to be predictable with okay, whichever side those guys line up on, we're going after that.
I think it's hard. I'm a huge Austin fan. I mean, I love the kid. I think he's great. He's got a lot going for him. Do you know what I mean? And it's a good story, and you want to get behind him and cheer for him and all those things. But I agree with Bob to some degree. I just think he's a little bit too short. I think it makes it hard for him. I think he has a spot on this team. I think it's that gadgety player. I think it's kick returns. It's, do you know what I mean? It's those types of things. I don't know that I think he's got what it takes to emerge as the number 2. I think that right now, where we stand today, we're looking at Van Jefferson as that guy until somebody proves him wrong, whether that's Roman Wilson or we sign somebody else.
Yeah,
No, I think a big thing will come down to who has more chemistry with Russell Wilson, because we haven't, I like what Bob said, we haven't seen the chemistry that Russell has with a lot of these guys. So
that's a good point.
We made Van Jefferson could have had a lot of chemistry with Justin Fields that does not, manifest with Russell Wilson. So that's why I want to see a lot of Russell Wilson this game, because it's chemistry that matters. How are these receivers going to respond to the quarterback? Because that matters so much. You could have a Devontae Adams on your team, but if he doesn't like the quarterback, he's not going to run his routes.
Let me add this real quick, just an opinion. We say that the hindrance or the Achilles for Calvin Austin is his height. He's at 5'9". Keep in mind, AB is 5'10", and look what he did. AB didn't play the slot.
Yeah, but there's a huge Ray. It doesn't seem like it. It's only 1 inch, but 5'9". Those guys, it's just too small. 5'10" is borderline too small. 5'11"
AB is it's like comparing somebody who's the same size as Tom Brady to Tom Brady. I don't know that it's fair to compare anybody to AB. There's something supernatural about that man's talent. You know what I mean? So I think that he had a different skill set than Austin does. Do you know what I mean? On top of having that other inch. I don't know. To me, I don't think if Calvin Austin was 5'10", he'd be Antonio Brown.
Yeah,
no. But this is height-wise. But again,
Brown was so much more physical than Austin too. I mean, he was 5'10", but he was 7 foot wide.
Yeah, he played
I
like
will
a
say,
big guy.
I will not mind Calvin Austin. If you're watching this, ball up, BAB. Prove us wrong.
I
would not mind that.
Prove us wrong.
BAB. Catches, and I'll pay attention.
I will say this. I'm starting to kind of agree with what Kaboli, a month ago he said this, or right before training camp started, and I thought he was nuts saying it, but he said the number 2 wide receiver will be one of the guys who gets cut on August 29th. And I'm starting to kind of agree with that if the Ayuk trade doesn't happen.
I'm just curious, just so I understand, because I know the cut date, the final date for a cut done is 4 p.m. on August 27th. Is that a waiver wire time between 27th and 29th? Just so I understand.
It's just what he said. He probably had the day wrong.
Oh,
whatever that date is.
I was just trying to update it because I have it on my calendar, the 27th, circled. I'm like, did I get it wrong?
I think he meant whoever was available. And
holy goodness, he gets hired by McAfee, can't get the dates right.
Yeah,
this was a while ago.
It was a month ago. Maybe that's why he got fired.
Yep, August 27th.
Yeah, he said it a long time ago.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. Oh, by the way, before we do this topic, I thought it was awfully nice that Zach's favorite player, Najee Harris, decided to give him a 40-yard touchdown run for his birthday. For his 40th birthday.
Right. 40 yards for 40 years.
Yep. And you didn't wear his jersey.
Pay that man.
Where's the jersey?
No. Those jerseys are for the season. There's certain jerseys I wear during the season, and I only wear the one of the player I feel needs the most help that week. That's legitimately how I choose my jerseys. So weirdly, I haven't worn my TJ jersey in a year and a half, because I'm like, if anyone doesn't need help, it's TJ. Right. So TJ, you stay here. I'm gonna wear nuts. That's how I tend to do it. So.
For those of you wondering, Zach wore Presley Harvin's jersey a lot last season.
Or maybe he should have. We should have got him a Mason Cole jersey.
If I was going to have a punter, I'd have Sepulveda. So thank you very much.
Okay. Does Zach Frazier see himself as the number 1 center? Great question, guys.
It depends on how badly Nick Herbig is. Nate Herbig. I get those two mixed up. I gotta fix that.
It's
The
almost
Nick
like
and
they're
Nate. You know
brothers.
what I'm talking
Right.
about. It's all context.
Yeah.
Because and Herbig, despite the fact that I genuinely feel like he knows this is Zach Frazier's job eventually. Down in his gut, he has to know this is not his job. He is in a temporary situation. I feels like he wants to do the best at it while he's there, but I feel that he has a very sharp ceiling. Like we've seen it. Like he's a good guy. We love the brother thing. It's great, but you are a guard and you are probably a depth guard at that. And that's fine. Charlie Batch was one of probably the best backup quarterback I have ever seen in my life. And he knew that was his job. He was a backup. That's what I think. If Herbig accepts that, that's fine, because Zach Frazier deserves this chance to play as much of this game as they will give him. I want to see every single snap, because I want to see if what he did last week, which is he showed attitude, he showed sustainability in the wrestling moves that he used against people. There was a push on the line. Can he sustain that over a full half? That's what I want to see.
I'm just going to say real quick that I think that he looked like, when we saw Frazier playing, he looked like a natural center who knew what he was doing, was in there doing it. And I felt Herbig gave me, like, I hate to say this, but like Kendrick Green vibes, like the round peg that we're trying to jam into a square hole. He just didn't belong there. Like, that's not his spot. And I really like Herbig. I want to see that kid have a good career in the NFL, but I just don't think it's at center. And I think we're doing him a disservice by forcing him into that role. And I just think that the time is now. I know that we like to ease our rookies in, but I think it's got to be Frazier.
I mean, the one thing I'll say is this is already Zach Frazier's job. He ran with the Wolves today. You could say because Herbig was injured. Bottom line is, when those two snaps got fumbled, and even if it's, no matter who you believe was responsible, the bottom line is the ball hit the ground on the center quarterback exchange. So at this point, you got a guy who's only had 60 snaps in the NFL at center. Zach Frazier has played a lot more center in West Virginia than Nate Herbig has played in the NFL. It's got to be Zach Frazier. I mean, there are a lot, and if you watch the press conference today with Andy Weidel, he talked about Frazier, how him and Dan Colbert, when they were watching the West Virginia Pitt game, were struck by both independently came up to each other and said, "Hey, did you see that West Virginia throwing around all the guys in the middle?" So it's his job. It's just, I mean, there was the subterfuge. Okay, we didn't want to say we're rookie starting. Okay, whatever. Bottom line is Frazier's the most experienced center on the roster.
Yeah.
The other thing that came out of the Andy Weidel press conference is they asked him about Broderick Jones eventually moving to the left side, and he said, yes, it's going to happen. He said it's nice to have depth and, have a guy like Dan Moore there, but bottom line is Broderick Jones is going. They didn't draft him to not be the left tackle.
Right.
And by the way, Von Miller, Super Bowl MVP guy, most feared pass rusher in the NFL for a while, still really good. Broderick Jones beat him up today on one reps. So, and Broderick has said, Ray Fittipaldo talked about this morning. Broderick has said he doesn't need much time to adapt to the left side. It's natural for him to be on the left side. He doesn't need much adjustment. So maybe him saying that, the coach is buying in. I still would rather. I agree with Fittipaldo, who really agrees with me because I said it first. I think Broderick should be on the left side and be getting those reps, because I would rather a guy who doesn't have much experience in the NFL at the left tackle spot getting those reps versus a guy who's not going to be on the roster next year.
Look at Zach Frazier, his position. As you say, he's going to be the starter. I wish at some point that Marquise Pouncey would come to Pittsburgh and work with him in training camp, just like what James Harrison did with the linebackers. And so, again, and of course, Pouncey came in right away and he did a good job. Zach Frazier, to me, yes, I think he's going to be the center of the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, does he need some work? Yes, he does.
He's a different kind of player, though. Bringing Pouncey in, Pouncey was a pulling center. He's a very unique guy. He was physical, but he was more mobile than physical. So I don't know, bringing Pouncey to Frazier other than just a hey buddy Steeler thing. I don't know how much he can really impact Frazier's game because I don't see Zach Frazier suddenly turning into a pulling center. I think he's just a bull. It reminds me a ton of Mike Webster.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison to make.
Yeah.
You make a comparison to Mike Webster.
What about Monty Dawson? What about the Monty Dawson? Well, yeah, I mean, God rest.
Monty Dawson and Marquise Pouncey were very similar.
Yes.
Monty Dawson was incredibly gifted at he was really the guy who became the pulling center, and Pouncey kind of followed his footsteps. You know,
yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
Will Corey Trice
to the defense?
Yes.
Defense. All right. Will Corey Trice Jr. establish himself as a viable NFL corner against the Buffalo Bills?
Price was on Cam Hayward's podcast this morning and talked about how hard it was, missing that whole year, and said that he was not willing to let it just slip away. So he said he spent the entire season on the sideline whenever he got a chance, in Patrick Peterson's ear, talking to him in Levi Wallace's ear, trying to soak up as much knowledge as he could, asking questions, watching what Joey Porter Jr. was doing, watching what the other guys were doing, and trying to learn kind of through osmosis or attrition of watching these things so that he would be prepped to come back and be the best that he could be. So he had talked a lot about being really excited to be back. They talked about, this notion of the avatars out there shutting things down, how excited they are to go up against some of the best in the league this year, and how great it's been to be able to work with somebody like George Pickens, who kind of mimics those behaviors with his incredible catches, to be able to kind of that iron sharpens iron idea. So, I think there's a love story there, for him being so similar to Joey Porter Jr. and wanting this idea of them. I think it would be a mistake for fans to assume that he's going to be a Joey Porter Jr. clone on the other side of the field. I don't think that that's quite fair to Trice, but he is ready to show that he's at 100, says he's at 100% and willing to play wherever and however they want him to.
That's true. And it's another situation where the injuries, I think, especially in this specific camp, because it seems like if a guy that they knew what they had in him had a minor injury, like Alex Highsmith or Deshaun Elliott or Dante Jackson, they were like, we're going to hold you out a little longer than we normally would because we need to see who we have behind you. And Corey Trice, from everywhere I've looked and read and heard, he has stepped up. He has consistently been against Van Jeffersons and Pat Freiermuth and George Pickens, and he has shut them down each time. And I didn't hear too much about. I know he played again in that third cornerback spot today, not the nickel, but the third one, and he has that pretty much wrapped up. That's what everybody says. That is his job to lose right now. So he'll get the majority of the spots at that third cornerback spot. But I'm just so happy that he's living up to what we were hoping, because we put a lot of expectation on him based on a very small sample size last season. So for him to work as hard as he did to make sure he didn't fall behind, I don't know how much he could have staffed up from Levi Wallace, but I'm glad that he talked to Patrick Peters.
Right.
Yeah, and with the Graylin Arnold injury, I think there's a very good chance, and we touched on this a little bit last night when we were talking. Corey Trice, his role is traditionally you think of the third cornerback as the nickel. That's not going to be his role. He's not your nickel back. It'd be an intriguing one, but it's not going to be his role. When he plays as the third cornerback, I think what we're going to see is Joey Porter and Trice on the outside and Dante Jackson slide into the nickel. He's fast. He can handle the position. He's played it before. He's a more viable option than Beanie Bishop. I think when we go in a base package, Trice is going to be on the bench. It'll be Dante Jackson and Joey Porter. But I do think in those three sets, we see Dante Jackson slide inside, especially if it's Beanie Bishop, undrafted free agent, trying to feel his way at the beginning of the season. I also think Darius Rush he played pretty well last week. I know he gave up a crossing route, but he was right there in the guy's hip pocket. And I mean, an inch more and he tips that ball away. I still think there's a place for Darius Rush on the team, and he has intriguing talent too. So there is still some guys out there who could maybe still on the street who you could maybe go get. There's guys that are going to be cut. Ultimately, I don't think you'll see Beanie Bishop starting. He'll probably play some, maybe like a Shandon Sullivan type role from last year. I think if he's our straight nickel corner, we got big problems because that probably means Corey Trice has slipped to the point where they're not comfortable having him on the field.
And don't discount what the Graylin Arnold injury means. This isn't if you didn't know his name before, you should have, because he was doing what is absolutely necessary, not just stepping up, but when Beanie Bishop, and yet again, I know Mike Tomlin said it wasn't due to performance. I watched that preseason game. Beanie Bishop played badly. He was a liability on that field in coverage and blitzing and you name it. So Beanie Bishop did not earn that spot, and so Graylin Arnold was brought in. He was playing that nickel spot, and he was playing it well. Now that he's out, Beanie Bishop is back in that spot. So we have a guy that we didn't want in that spot. So I'm going to be watching that nickel spot probably more than a lot of other positions because they played Ryan Watts in it in the first preseason game a lot. There, I want to see maybe they cycle Rush in. Who are we going to see? Because they pretty much at this point they want anyone but Beanie Bishop in that spot. They want any excuse to not have Beanie Bishop play nickel corner. And if he does, it means that no one else on the roster was better than him, and that's not a good thing. So if number 30 is playing, by the way, that is Beanie Bishop's number. If anybody wants to know what number to watch, you watch number 30. He cannot be as bad as he was. There has to be some improvement. If he is the same liability, I would say he's in danger of losing his job before the cut day.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of rookie corners get toasted. Yeah. I mean, he could easily rebound and bounce back, but bottom line is he's got the same problem as Calvin Austin, and I think it's even a bigger problem at cornerback, although with nickelback you can kind of get away with it a little more than an outside receiver. He's 5'9". He's small.
Yeah. I think the thing that's hard about Beanie Bishop, and this is why, I didn't come down too hard on the guy, is he's an undrafted rookie. Do you know what I mean? Nobody expected him to walk on this team and have the skills needed to be a starter in the NFL. Do you know what I mean? If he was, he'd have been drafted in the first round. He's not there yet. I mean, even first round guys aren't necessarily there yet. It's a big gap between college and the pros. And so I think, from a Tomlin perspective, he's going to be looking at if he even has like the base skills. You know what I mean? Does he have the teachable elements that you can use to get him to where you need him to be a depth piece on this 53-man roster, and the hunger and the desire and all of those things to do it? I mean, I don't know. I'm not there to know whether we see it from him. I know we're seeing it from Corey Trice, it seems like, you know what I mean? And I think Trice is benefiting from Cam Sutton's suspension. I think that that's going to be a huge benefit to him. He's going to get some opportunities he may not have gotten otherwise.
What player are you most intrigued to watch on Saturday, guys?
Well, we talked about quite a few already, but because I know, Quez Watkins is one of my bigger ones. I know I want to see how fast he can bounce back, but I'm kind of interested because Kyle Allen played okay last week, but John Rhys Plumlee is kind of this do anything, whatever you ask me to do kind of guy, and that legitimately intrigues me because it's going to be an interest. The closer we get to that cut day, if both of these guys continue to play like Kyle Allen plays, like a third string quarterback should play, like adequately with some bumps and bruises. And Plumlee keeps showing up in whatever role they ask him to do. And again, he's not just showing up. He's showing some productivity and some ability to do So what do you do with those two guys? You're not going to keep 4 quarterbacks. So does Plumlee become that athlete guy from like NCAA back in the day that you kind of move around or whatever? That really intrigues me. So if you want to know the numbers, Plumlee's 18. Kyle Allen's 4. So watch those two numbers because sometimes they could be on the field together. If Plumlee's worked with the receivers, you're going to see Plumlee returning kicks. He was covering kicks. He was making tackles. I want to see if they legitimately get really creative and just start seeing what he can do. Because if I was the Steelers and I've seen what I saw out of Plumlee so far, I would get so excited and so creative because the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work. Yeah. That's the worst thing that can happen. So I want to see a lot of fun. Because I think this would be the kind of football that is pure fun. Like all the like the little math numbers, it doesn't count when it comes to this because it's just what can this guy do? This guy's loving this so much. He's having fun. We're having fun. So I think Kyle Allen's 3, but I think you keep Plumlee in some way. So I'll be watching those 2.
I think Plumlee's an interesting story. I think he's another fun story. He's another guy that's easy to root for. You know what I mean? I've watched a bunch of his interviews and done a bunch of articles about him, and he's so fun. And I will say this, that I think that the Steelers, like if the Steelers had a theme word or a buzzword for the 2024 season, it's been versatility. And they keep talking about this desire to have these versatile players, whether it's on the offensive line or in their running backs or wide receivers. And I think that Plumlee brings interesting versatility to the quarterback room. You know, I mean, we've seen him in different positions. He said that the wide receivers coach pulls him sometimes to come during practice and play wide receiver a little bit. So I mean, he's doing all kinds of stuff and showing a lot of willingness. So I think he's interesting. But who I'm most intrigued to see on Saturday, since we've talked about a lot of the other people that I'd be interested in, and Trey Fatani will not be playing as far as we know. And he's somebody that I definitely wish was, so that we could see him. I think he needs the reps. Is the special teams unit. I'm curious to see how they bounce back from the kind of adversity they had last game. They didn't play great against the Texans. Yep. And I think that's unusual for the Steelers. So is that some growing pains with some of this new stuff that's going on with these new players? And how does Danny Smith kind of get them back on track and see something that looks a little bit smoother?
You know, I want to say the most intriguing player for me to watch, I want to see it again. Patrick Wilson. I want to see it again.
You mean Peyton Wilson?
Peyton Wilson?
Well, yeah, Peyton Wilson. I'm sorry. I'm mixed up with Patrick Queen. I'm sorry. Peyton Wilson. I
merged them together as one like huge monster player.
One big inside middle linebacker. Yeah. So again, I mean, he is very versatile, and like I said, like Plumlee, you know, he's like a Swiss Army knife to me. I believe, and yes, you want to do what you can to make the roster great. But Peyton Wilson, in my book, in my opinion, he's the one I want to see again, because granted there were no injuries with him. No major injuries or anything, probably little nicks and everything. But I want to see if he can do it again this coming Saturday.
In coverage. I need to see more out of him in coverage. That was the only kind of weak spot I saw. He got a little overexcited and overran his coverage, which is I know they said he kind of did that in college too. So if we could wrap that up quickly, because I don't want the Devin Bush where, you know, you overrun every tackle, you overrun everything. Peyton Wilson's got to ease that speed back. So that's what I agree. So I'll be looking at that specifically.
Yeah, I'm looking for a couple of different guys on the offensive line, but my number one player to watch this week is Connor Hayward. I think last week we kind of saw it a little bit, what we can do with him, maybe in a fullback, H-back type position. He's the number one guy on the depth chart at fullback. Coletto is still battling him for the spot, but I think ultimately that's Connor Hayward's role in the NFL. So I want to see if he takes another step, and maybe they throw a wrinkle or so in there for Russell Wilson. Let's face it. I heard today where they were talking about, as far as the Steelers offense and the number one and the number two receiver, it was a segment on ESPN with Stephen A. Smith, that the swing pass to Jaylen Warren is going to be a big part of the offense. And I think those little bleed routes with Connor Hayward, especially if Russell Wilson is the quarterback, he threw more checkdowns than anybody else in the league last year. And that's saying something, because Kenny Pickett was a starting quarterback in the NFL last year. Yeah. So Connor Hayward, Jaylen Warren, getting those little short blip passes and then turning them into something could be very interesting. I really want to see Dylan Cook. I'm hoping what they do is, I'm sure they'll have Dan Moore out there for a series or two with Broderick on the right side. But what I want to see is Broderick move to left early in the game, and let's bring in Dylan Cook at right tackle. Troy Fatano's hurt. I want to see if what we saw last week against the 2s and 3s looks anywhere near what it does against the 1s. So I would love to see a series or two against the 1s for Dylan Cook and see how much he's improved. Isaac Seumalo, Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington. I want to see a series or maybe a couple of plays where those guys are lined up next to each other, because last week when Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, and Spencer Anderson came in, we got a huge push up in the middle. I want to see if we get
Yes,
that
we did.
same kind of push up front with Isaac in the game. I don't think he'll be in the game too long, but I want to see that. So those are some of the guys I'm looking for. On defense, I'm interested to see who plays safety for us because Zach we talked about it in prep last night. Zach mentioned Deshaun Elliott he played a decent amount in the game, but we didn't really recognize him. And then he's kind of been hurt all week. So it's KZ. If Deshaun Elliott's hurt, he's a big hitter. I really was excited about getting him. We need to kind of solidify where that's going to be. And we talked about Watts earlier, the rookie. His future is safety. I mean, he would be a slow cornerback, a very slow cornerback, but he could be a very effective safety. And I know they're kind of out of necessity playing him some corner, but I do think the long-term plan is to turn him into a special teams ace and a safety. I know they've talked about Miles Killebrew. They don't even want to see him on special teams till the regular season because they want him to see, hey, as Ryan Watts replace Miles Killebrew as the special team ace, kind of third or fourth safety on the team. So that's another one I'm kind of watching to see, hey, what's going to happen at safety? Because we kind of need, second preseason game, we need to solidify it because we play a lot of three safety sets. KZ, Elliott, and Fitzpatrick was the plan, but is it going to be the reality?
Again, I want to say thank you all for tuning in. And again, we'll give a shout out to Zach. Happy birthday once again, buddy.
Thank you.
All right.
Got the balloons.
Any final words, Leanne, Bob?
If you watch the podcast, we appreciate you. And we would love it if you would go and like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm if you do those things for us. We also really want to hear from you. So please drop us a comment, whether it's in YouTube, any of our social media sites, our hashtags up there. Our link tree is up to the side of Ray's head. You can find all of our social media sites for the podcast there. You can shoot us an email, you can contact us any number of ways, send us a carrier pigeon, whatever you want. But we want to hear what you think. So if you agree with something we said today, disagree, if you think there's something else we should be talking about, let us know who you're most interested in seeing play this week. We want to hear from you.
Yep, and remember next week after the game, not right after the game, we'll probably go live on TikTok for a little bit, which, by the way, Zach, we reached a milestone on TikTok.
100 followers.
Woohoo! Yeah. So we're dropping TikToks frequently, so please check us out there as well.
Yes. Guys, hey, thank you all for coming on. We'll see you next time. This is the 60 City Rings podcast. Take care.